Hello everybody, this is Mithril Zenith, and today we are going to talk about something that I've been thinking of for a while, and that you voted on my YouTube channel poll recently as what you wanted to hear about next. Where have all the red unit recruitments gone? This is going to be kind of a mild history, talking about the history of recruiting new units in the series, where you generally tended to get new units for your army from, and how that's changed over time. Now, it's not really as simple as, well, you're not getting units from, recruiting red units anymore outright, but, well, let's talk with it. Let's talk about it. This is not going to be a fully scripted thing. It's not going to be fully, detailed. If you want a full detailed history of every single unit, I can probably go into it. But what I have here is I've pulled up the wiki, and I have pulled up to the list of characters in every single Fire Emblem game, just to kind of go through, catch, okay, where you recruit each unit from, how many are on-map red unit recruitments, how many are not, and kind of when that started changing. First up, Fire Emblem 1, they did not have the technology to have green units yet. Green units do not exist until Fire Emblem 4. So Fire Emblem 1 through 3, you don't have green units. You just have your units and enemy units on maps. And so when you get units, you either start with them, like your crew in Chapter 1. You start a chapter with them, like, Board, Cord, Barst, and Ogma. You get them from a village, something like Riss. Or you recruit them as an enemy, a recruitable enemy such as Daros. So, if we look over here, we have Daros, Caster, Navarre, Classic archetype of the red unit that joins you. Daros, Caster, Navarre, Mathis, Merrick you get from a village. These is the Wolf Guard. Wendell technically is a red unit that you recruit. Rickard, also technically a red unit that recruit. And a lot of these red units don't actually attack you. They will talk to Marth the first chance they get, or they'll sit there and do nothing. They don't necessarily attack you, but a lot of them, they do exist as red units. One sec. Mathis, Wendell, Rickard, Bantus from a village, Caesar and Rad join at the start of the map. Roger, George, I think, joins from a village. Maria and Minerva, another classic set of archetypes whose basic gameplay role is defined by them being enemy units that defect to your squad. Lind is from that village. Jake is, I think, from a village. No, Jake is... No, yeah, Jake you talk with Sita. Delph, Mechlin, Thomas, Boa, Midia. Astrum you talk with Midia. Beck's from a village. Katria and Pala are enemy units. Oh, I'm scrolling too fast. Katria and Pala are enemy units that recruit. Aaron Zamson are a village. Zane is technically an enemy unit that you recruit, even though, again, he can't do anything and is coded not to do anything. Est, same. Tiki, same. Lauren's, same. And Alice and Goto. So, 17 units are red units that you recruit. Granted, a number of these probably would have been fine or maybe better as green units. They are not necessarily aggressive attackers, but 17 units from the very first game are red units that you recruit into your army. This will change greatly, as in Gaiden you recruit no red units to your army. Because in Gaiden you don't recruit any units outside of post-map exploration sequences. Like, hey, you took over the castle. You go to the castle basement and you unlock it, and that's why you get Claire. Or, hey, you're wandering the village. You talk to the villagers. And you get, Gray, Tobin, Cliff, Lucas, whatever. Technically, there are a couple of units that are enemies that get recruited through other means. Like Delphia, you fight her, and then you kill the boss, and then in the post-map scene, she joins you. Zeke, if you rescued Tatiana, he defects. I guess that is one thing, is that there is technically green units existing in Fire Emblem 2. It's just reserved for Actually, I don't think they're green units. I think they turn into blue units, but they're uncontrollable blue units, kind of like summons. And they turn into those, and then do that. Technically, where are they? Dean and Sonia are red units, but you don't necessarily recruit them in the same way. You kill one, and then the other joins you in a post-map sequence. Yeah. So there's not really a lot that you can do with this, as to say, well, you know, red unit recruitment isn't really a thing, but that's also just how Gaiden works. Fire Emblem 3, once again, you know, book 1, same sort of thing, pretty much all the same units. I think Riss is the only, maybe Daros isn't in here as well. I think, yeah, Riss and Daros don't exist, but everyone else is present and accounted for. And then in book 2, you get similar things where a lot of units join you early on, or join from villages. Warren gets recruited instead of, you know, Warren gets recruited as an enemy. Mathis again gets recruited as an enemy. Serious Caster, Sita, Rickard, Samuel, or Samto in some translations, gets recruited as an enemy. George does. Eric Arlen or Alarian sometimes gets recruited as a recruitable enemy. Abel's recruitable enemy because Est is captured. Sheena is a recruitable enemy with a specific recruitment context. People say it's like the Lawrence archetype is the difficult to recruit enemy general that you get in like late into the game and like past the second half of the game. I think Sheena is more true to that archetype. Lawrence, you literally just talk with Catrion. It's not a thing. And then all of the clerics at the end. FE4, so yeah, FE3 is basically just FE1. FE4, you have, okay, in Act 1, all of these join normally, Ira is a recruitable enemy. Jamka is a recruitable enemy. Holland's a secret recruit from the arena who you have to fight, but that's different. Beowulf is a recruitable enemy. Bridget turns and is not an actual enemy. Okay, Skahak. Is that really his actual name? Skahak? Interesting. Known as Ulster in Awakening. Okay. That I was gonna say, wasn't he Ulster? Yeah, no. Dermot, Tristan, Lester, Dame, Ify, Julia, Fee, Armina. All of these are Luchar and Luhalba, recruitable enemies. Ares, defect, so it's not technically an enemy. Tinny's recruitable enemy, I think. Hannibal's recruitable enemy. Again, the general with a really odd, specific recruitment thing late into the game. Lawrence gets called out into the archetype because he's a recruitable general, but that's more Shima. But it's interesting how we have these archetypes built around enemy recruitment. Ira being the Navarre archetype, a Myrmidon, an enemy Myrmidon, normally with a killing edge or some sort of killing skill, normally recruited by a cleric. Of course, I think in that aspect, Ira is actually not the Navarre. It's Jamka that ends up being the Navarre, and Ira is just the Myrmidon component, and Jamka is the killer weapon and recruited by cleric component, so that's kind of interesting. But we have these archetypes that are defined by how they get recruited. So why are we leaving these archetypes behind? Like, they're fun, they're interesting, they're cool callbacks. They're not waste of space. Thracia, we get a lot more different recruitments thanks to the capture mechanic. Like Lithis, we get number of people who just kind of join. Dalsin, you recruit. Shiva, you recruit. Another classic Navarre, recruited by your cleric. Myrmidon with a killer sword, recruited by a cleric. Classic archetype. Fred and Olwyn, different sort of recruitment there, very different. Pern, technically that's a red unit recruitment right there. Salem is a red unit recruitment. I think you have to capture him though. I forgot exactly how it works. But yeah, Salem's red unit recruitment. Pern is a red unit recruitment. Trude is then a red unit recruitment after recruiting Pern. Dean's not a red unit. Homer is a village you have to visit with a specific unit. Ilios is a red unit recruitment, but also a specific. Ralph is a green unit recruitment, I think. Sarah, Shanam, Miranda. Xavier is a notorious recruitment for the latter half, late game general, Shima archetype. Sias, arguably, Sias is weird with that. Galzus as well. Some of the best units in the game, at least some of the more memorable units in the game, are these red units you recruit. So where did they go? Well, so these are all the Kaga games, and as you can see, Gaiden didn't have red unit recruitment. So, it's Fire Emblem 1 and 3, which followed the same fate. 4, which has a decent number of enemy recruitments. Not a ton, but a couple. A couple very notable ones, actually. Thracia, which has several notable ones. You don't... And I think that what people miss about recruiting red units is most emblematic in something like Thracia or even Genealogy, where it's the recruitment of the unit actively transforms the map. Like, if Xavier was just you talk to him with Leaf, and that's how you recruit him, sure, he's easy to recruit, but he's not memorable. He then just becomes, this general you get late into the game. Meanwhile, you get the entire story. You get everyone talking about how awful he is to recruit, and how once you get him, he's not necessarily worth the effort. Even though he's a good unit, he's not necessarily worth the effort. You get this discussion, you get this layered, you get that map becomes so much more interesting in trying to recruit him, because if you just don't try to recruit him, the map is real simple and real easy. Ira. Trying to recruit Ira makes capturing the first castle in Chapter 1 actually kind of difficult, actually kind of interesting. So many of these units, like the 4 bishops, the 4 clerics, recruiting them transforms the endgame, transforms the final chapter. And so this is why people miss red unit recruitment. These red unit recruitments are meaningful. They mean something. Fire Emblem 6. Rutger, one of the best units in the game, is a red unit. Who else? I think Astolfo, the best thief, is a red unit. Fur and Sin are red units. Geese is a red unit. Gonzalez is a red unit. A lot of these mid-game units, Klein and Thea, are technically red units too. Bartra and Echidna are green units. Kath is a red unit. Infamous recruitment. Ray is a red unit. Melody is, I think, technically not a red unit. Percival's a red unit, though. Garrett's a red unit. Zeiss, I think Zeiss is a red unit? I forget. Douglas is definitely a red unit. His, again, late game general, awkward recruitment, though it's not even necessarily the recruitment so much as is keeping him from killing himself onto you. And yeah, so this is more mid to late game loaded instead of early to mid game loaded, but a good number of solid units are red units you have to recruit. And Fire Emblem 6 is a game with an infamously stacked roster of a ton of units, but where the best units are head and shoulders above the rest. And those best units mostly are red units you have to go out of your way to recruit. It means something. FE7. Okay, what red units Can we recruit here in FE7? I don't see... Okay, Dorcas in Lin mode. We have... No. Guy. Green unit. Raven. So Guy, Raven. Green units again. Legault is a red unit. Heath is a red unit. Geats is a red unit. Harkin and Corel are red units. Nino and Jafar are green units. Vita's a red unit. Yeah. Not as many red units, but pretty notable. Basically every hero, like every Hero Crest user outside of your starting Axe Bros pretty much is a red unit that you have to recruit. Heath and Vita, your only Wyvern Riders, are red units you have to recruit. And so while there are not necessarily as many as previous games, they're still important. There's still a lot of them. Fire Emblem 8, let's go through this. We have some green units. We have a lot of green units, actually. Joshua, our first red unit recruitment. Then we have Amelia, a red unit recruitment. Marisa, a red unit recruitment. Cormag, red unit recruitment. Renek, red unit recruitment. And that's it. So like five or six. But of those, some pretty notable units. Again, both your Myrmidons are red units. Your dedicated Wyvern is a red unit. And Amelia is a red unit. So you have already a recruitable recruit who, fresh-faced recruit who's really full of idealism. Turn that idealism. Get him onto the right side, or your side, I guess. You have your Myrmidons who fight and get convinced, and have to be convinced to not kill you, You have your Wyvern Rider, who is full of pride for their country, but their country is, doing things they don't like. Classic recruitment changes. These are still present. Like, Cormag is the Minerva of the game. Joshua, obviously, is the Navarre of the game. Amelia, there's not really an Amelia archetype. Not really an archetype for her. Renek, a rogue, a thief. Arguably the Rickard of the game then. But it's hard to say. Now we're getting into the weeds of what counts as a connection. There's not really an equivalent of like a Shima. Just like there's not really an equivalent of a Shima in Fire Emblem 7. But we'll see in Fire Emblem 9. That does change. Shinon. Re-recruiting him. He's a red unit. Mia is a green unit. Ileana is a red unit. Kieran, Nephany, Braum. You have prisoners here. Zahark is a red unit. Jill is a red unit. So Zahark, you have Navarre. Jill, you have Minerva. Morim and Tormod, I think, are technically... Like, they're different than red units because you fight them, and then they join you after you fight them. Which is different, which we'll get into, which is kind of more the direction that a lot of Fire Emblem things are going over. Toronio is a red unit. Har is a red unit. Har is... Between Toronio and Har, you definitely have your... It's not a difficult recruitment, but Toronio is that late game general that you do recruit, so he's closer to Lorenz than he is like Shima. Har is a red unit recruit. Nasir and Enna, technically, in a weird way, Nasir is more the Shima of the game because you have to go through a difficult process to recruit him, which is kill the Black Knight with Ike. And then you recruit him, and he ends up being good, but not necessarily super useful. But then you kind of get Enna if you don't. So once again, not as many red units, but a couple notable ones. Jill, definitely notable. Zahark, arguably, if you like Myrmidons, if you like Swordmasters. Ileana, if you like mages. Shinon. Shinon actually probably has... No, here's the thing. In terms of weird recruitments, Shinon has the weirdest recruitment in Path of Radiance because you have to talk with a Rolf and then kill with Ike. And so you still have these weird recruitment archetypes popping up in the game. And they make for interesting stories. Yeah, Devdan's a red unit. Radiant Dawn is weird with recruitable units, but Aaron is definitely one. Aaron is your Navarre archetype, by the way, because Aaron is the enemy unit that you recruit with a cleric. Path of Radiance does not have one of these, as even though Zahark is the enemy unit, is the enemy Myrmidon with a killing edge that you recruit, it gets recruited by a Laguz, not a cleric. If anything, an element of that gets put forward in one of Devdan's possible recruitments, where you can recruit him with Mist, which would be a more true cleric recruiting enemy red unit. Yeah, Aaron is a different shade of the Navarre archetype. These are all green units. Fiona is, in a weird way, the Shima archetype of Act 1. I'm scrolling too far down. Because she has, I guess, technically a weird recruitment, but I mean, she's more of a Zeke because she turns into a green unit and runs. Who of these also are red units? Yeah, no one else really, so it's like just Aaron. And then we go through. Heather is a green unit, or is like a village... No, I think she's a green unit. Yeah, none of those are red units. Here, Grail Mercenaries. A lot of these just join you. Part 4. I mean, Peleus has a weird recruitment, but that's not necessarily in-game. That's a... you have to beat the game once, and then he comes back as a reward, and that's the same thing as Saffron over here. Yeah, none of these are red units. So technically... Aside from one... Okay, so technically, at base, the only red unit that you recruit as a red unit in Radiant Dawn is Aaron. So if you want to point to a game that really killed red unit recruitment, this is it. Except, in Part 3, when you are fighting the Dawn Brigade as the Grail Mercenaries, you can re-recruit Jill, Zahark, and Meg over to the Grail Mercenaries. If you talk to them with the corresponding unit. Braum for Meg, Har for Jill, and Lether Mordecai for Zahark. And so, outside of those, though, Aaron is the only red unit that you recruit. Straight up recruit. Because, like, Gareth and Nasir are a different category. They're red units that you recruit after the mission, not red units that get recruited during the map. So that's interesting that technically there's only one red unit you recruit mid-map. Shadow Dragon is just a retread of FE1. You do add in a few extra units like Horus, who end up being red units as well that you recruit. FE12, retread of FE3 Book 2. Even more units that just get thrown at you. There's so many units in this game. Awakening. Let's look at Awakening again, and I think Kellam, is a green unit. Longku, you don't actually fight him, he just gets given to your army after you do the arena stuff. Okay, Gaius is a red unit that you recruit, and Gregor's a green unit, I think. Maybe he just joins, actually. I forget. Where is... Oh, yeah, Tharja is a red unit. So that's like Tharja and Gaius are the only recruitable red units. Libra, I'm pretty sure, is a green unit. Henry joins at the start of the map, I want to say. And then Paralogs, there's a lot of green units. All the Childs are... green. Okay, not all the Childs are green units. Some of the children are red units, so there's a couple more in here. but a lot of them are green units before you recruit them. Yeah, so once again, Awakening only has like 2, maybe a couple more, arguably, depending on how you take the child units. Uh, red units to recruit. SOV is a retread of Gaiden, so then there's no real red units to recruit here. Three Houses is another weird recruitment game where technically none of these units are red units you recruit on map. Technically, none of these units get recruited on map in the first place. They all get recruited in monastery segments, and the only ones that you end up recruiting on map, air quote, are just enemies that if you kill them in a certain route, you can choose to spare them and have them join your army, like Lysithea. If you didn't recruit her... Yeah, Lysithea, if you didn't recruit her in to your base army, maybe if you did, I forget exactly how it works. But yeah, like Lysithea is an example of a unit that you can technically recruit in the later half of Crimson Flower, but that doesn't count as a red unit recruitment. And so this is the first non-Gaiden, non-Echoes game that has 0 red unit on-map recruitments. And if anything, I think is the only one. Because although Engage doesn't have a lot, Engage has 3 green units and 1 red unit that you recruit on-map. Linden is recruited on-map as a red unit. And maybe more than 3 green units, because Seedall is a green unit. Jade is a green unit. Sapphire is a green unit. And then the rest of the units that you fight as bosses or enemies and then join you later, like Ivy, Hortensia, Mauvir, and Vale, those all join either mid-map or post-map after an event, not by being converted from red units into green units by your units. So technically a red unit does exist, but that's just Linden, and you just talk with him with Ivy. Oh, and John and Anna are technically green units that you recruit as well. So what we have is a lot of units joining as red units. No units, but Gaiden has different mechanics. Less units overall, less units joining as red units, but still very impactful ones. Still very solid use of archetypes. The Navarre archetype, the Minerva archetype, the... So basically what I'm saying is that the Navarre, Minerva, and Shima... I'm not going to use Lawrence as the archetype. Navarre, Minerva, and Shima archetypes are all present, pretty much, in some way or another. Through Thracia, through FE6, and then you hit FE7, and it starts getting questionable. They start kind of dropping off. Enemy recruitments, unit recruitments in general, get a lot easier, a lot more straightforward. There's a lot less confusion outside of sometimes just who has to be the one to recruit them. Like, for instance, with... Actually, no, that is FE6. Like, I think Jafar is technically the hardest recruitment in Fire Emblem 7, and that's not that hard at all. It's really obvious. You recruit Nino and then you recruit Jafar. It's only difficult because Jafar can die sometimes. FE8 actually gives us more of these archetypes again that weren't really in FE7. FE9 has some mentions, some nods to those archetypes, but still doesn't really have them, really started to fall off on them. And then you have, even though FE9 does have more red unit recruitments, and then Radiant Dawn really starts dropping red unit recruitment as a feature. You have a couple. You have Aaron, and then the army changes, and that's it. Shadow Dragon is another remake. That's another remake. Awakening, you only have Gaius and Tharja as red unit recruitments, and then maybe some of the child units. I forget which ones. I think the majority of them are green units. Cynthia, I know, is a red unit, because that's just the weird way her map works. And then I'm not going to count the other, like, Paralog, should be dead villains. Yeah. And so Oh, Fates. I never talked about Fates. Somehow I passed it up. Okay. Well, let's talk about Fates. In Birthright, you have Silas. I forget if Silas is actually a red unit or if it's just like the boss that you defeat and then he joins you after. Kagro, Reyna. Reyna, I think, is a green unit you have to talk to on the map. Yeah, none of these are... Okay, Shura. I think Shura is the only real red unit. I could be wrong, and I could be forgetting one of the units, but I think Shura is the only, like, actual red unit you recruit. Conquest. Nyx is a red unit. Xander. Shura. Shura is an event recruitment, not really a true red unit. Same as Flora. Flora and Azana. Revelations. I think you have more in Revelations because they had to shove all these units in somehow. Do I remember who all is recruited in what order? No, I don't actually remember. But you get a lot of these units just thrown at you. I think Nyx is still a red unit and Shura is still a red unit. I know that you fight against a lot of these, and they just kind of start coming out of the woodworks to join you. Most of these are not red units, though. I think it's just Nyx and Shura. I think over the entirety of Fates, of all aspects, outside of some of the child units, and by some I mean like very few of the child units, maybe, there are very few red units. I think the majority of them are green units. They either just join your army straight up or come in as green units that you can talk to and recruit. Yeah, it's a copy of that. Three Houses has weird recruitments as well, kind of like Gaiden. And yeah, this has, 3 or 4 green units, depending on, 3 or 5, depending on if you count Jean and Anna, who will join you at the end of the chapter anyway, even if you don't talk to them. And only 1 red unit. And so, yeah, going through the list, we have a lot of red units to recruit. And then somewhere after the GBA era, it's like the GBA and then Path of Radiance. And then Radiant Dawn just kind of starts to phase out red unit recruitment as a whole. And we never really get more than, like, token red unit recruitment appearances after that point. Like, the hardest recruitment of all of the recruitments since Path of Radiance is Shinon. Or technically Nasir, but that's an event. It's Shinon, who you have to, talk with Rolf and then kill with Ike. That's the hardest recruitment we've gotten since GBA era. Red unit recruitment really has disappeared. And so the question then to ask is why? Why has red unit recruitment been phased out? I think first of all we need to ask why it was so prevalent. And for that we come back to Fire Emblem 1 and say, well, they didn't have the technology of green units. And so they had these recruitable units as red units, but a lot of them wouldn't attack you, and a lot of them recruited themselves, like Daros. You have Fire Emblem Gaiden, who didn't have any map recruitments, and they just recruited through events. You have, once you started having a little bit more variety, you have FE4, which still uses a lot of red unit recruitments, but makes each recruitment feel more impactful instead of just kind of being, you just talk to them with someone. It's like, no, you have to do something to recruit them, or talking with them is difficult, because the unit you have to talk with is difficult, has a hard time getting there. Thracia is the peak of difficult recruitments, because after this point Kaga leaves, and you don't get Kaga's mastermind of, like, map mechanics anymore. That is one thing that I think Kaga gets, not talked about enough. Kaga is a mastermind of map mechanics. And if you play Vestaria Saga or Bearwick Saga or TRS, you will know that. But yeah, and then we get to GBA games, and the recruitment gets simpler. They're all just kind of talks again, with red units, a lot of green units. now starting to get recruited. There's not really a ton of green units through FE5, but then FE6, you start seeing a lot more green units to be recruited, mixed in with the red units. FE7, a lot more of the units you recruit are green units. FE8, same thing. A lot more units are green units. Actually, FE8 doesn't have a ton of green units. It does have some. Actually, no, it does have quite a few green units that you recruit. But it also has a decent mix of red units. FE9, you get some red units. You get not many green units, actually, anymore. It's a couple of red units and mostly events again. So I guess by FE9, they really started to phase out red unit recruitment, and you only got a handful of them. So yeah, basically post-GBA era, you didn't get a lot of red unit recruitments anymore. And then you started getting a smattering of green unit recruitments, but they really don't do a ton of that. You got more green units to recruit in Awakening, and I think in Fates, but in Fates, everyone starts joining, hey, it's me and my 2 retainers. And that becomes the standard that Engage follows. And 3 Houses is just different, and that's a retread of Gaiden. So, yeah. Did red unit recruitment disappear from the series? Not entirely, but I think emotionally it really has. We don't have those recruitment stories anymore. We don't have stories like, heck, FE8, going Ephraim route, trying to recruit Marissa. You need to get Ewan from a house. He is a 4-move pupil, and then use him to recruit Marissa, who will kill Ewan if you send him in alone, so you need to bait Marissa out. But she is a fragile unit who can die, but also has a Wodao, or Shamshir, I'm sorry, Wodao by any other name, and can crit and kill a unit if they're too weak. So you need to lure out Marissa to hit your unit, to talk to her with Ewan. And she's not even that good of a unit, but you have to do this weird thing to recruit her, and that recruitment itself makes her more memorable. That effort you put into her recruitment makes people want to use her because they're like, I put in this effort to get this unit, I'm going to get something out of this unit. Renak, another perfect example. You chase him across the whole map just to get with him barely with Larachel or your lords and a bunch of money to recruit him, and then he's just like, okay, he's a passable rogue. He's a mobile, he's a mobile lockpick that doesn't actually need a lockpick. He's a thief that doesn't need a lockpick, and that's all he is. But you go through the effort of getting him, and so it makes him more memorable. Chasing Renak through the palace is a lot more memorable than just kind of having the rogue join in at the start or end of the chapter, being like, oh hey, by the way, I'm an extra thief. Nobody would remember Renak if he joined at the end of chapter 14 through an event, or even at the start of chapter 14 through an event. No one would really remember recruiting Renak. But everyone who's played FE8 remembers recruiting Renak because you have to chase him through the palace to get to him. Nobody would remember Marissa if she just joined automatically, but because you have to talk to her and convert her to your side, people remember her recruitment. Amelia is another case where you have to work for this unit, you have to recruit them, you learn more about her through her recruitment on map, which makes some people want to use her. If she just joined people's army automatically, I think even fewer people than do would use her because they don't have that kind of sunk cost feeling about recruiting her. Yeah, and so I think, are we losing something by, removing red unit recruitment? I think the answer is yes. I very much feel that Fire Emblem has lost something by removing red unit recruitment. And yes, we technically have red unit recruitment still in the game today with Linden. Big whoop. It's 1 unit. We literally recruit 1 red unit by talking with either Ivy, Hortensia, or Alir. And he's a funny sage with a fun, quirky ability that makes crit builds really cool with him, who has fun, weird support conversations. But I legitimately forgot that Linden was an enemy that you recruit until I was coming through and thinking about making this video, and I'm like, oh yeah, you do recruit a red unit. The feeling's gone. The spirit is, like, the mechanic is there still, yes, but the feeling, the emotion of it is gone. Meanwhile, Fire Emblem 1, Fire Emblem Shadow Dragon, like, a significant chunk of your army is recruited enemies. A lot of good units and a lot of bad units are recruited enemies. And if you don't recruit them, you're missing almost half your army, and you're living off of, like, free walk-on replacements. And sure, some of those units are the best units in the game, but some of those units, you know, their whole purpose is for you to recruit them from the enemy. I don't know. So some people have argued that green unit recruitment has replaced red unit recruitment, and I don't necessarily think that's the case either. Because, yeah, you have, 3 to 5 green units here. You have more in Awakening and Fates. But you don't really have that many in Tellius. You have a couple, but not many. You have some more in the GBA era, but you don't even really have green units to recruit before that point, before GBA. And because green units have been being phased out as well, recruitable green units, you're not phased out, but they're just kind of there. Some people have argued, well, recruiting enemies off the map in general has been being phased out, and I would say definitely. It definitely has. Recruiting more allies by talking with them on the map and having them join your side mid-map has been being phased out in Fire Emblem. It wasn't a part of Three Houses at all. It wasn't a part of SOV at all. Granted, it wasn't part of Gaiden. It wasn't really a part of Fates at all. The last time that's really appeared in a meaningful way, okay, it happened occasionally in Fates. But it's like, it happens occasionally in Engage, occasionally in Fates, occasionally, well, a little more than occasionally in Awakening. And so, yeah, I think IS has just kind of gotten lazy with how they give us units. They're just like, just throw them 3 units every couple chapters, they'll be happy. Three Houses, while it did remove on-map recruitment entirely, it did so by doing an entirely different mode of recruitment. So I can't necessarily hate it for it. SOV, again, it's Guidance recruitment. Can't necessarily hate it for it. But with Fates and Engage, they just kind of throw you units 3 at a time and eventually drip feed you, like, hey, here's a recruit here, here's a recruit there on map. I don't know. Maybe I'm getting all worked up over nothing. Maybe this is absolutely nothing to worry about. And this has taken like 45 minutes, so I guess this is a little bit more of a comprehensive history of enemy recruitment, of on-map recruitment in Fire Emblem than I expected it to be. But yeah, leave your thoughts in the comments down below. What do you think of on-map recruitment? What do you think of enemy recruitment? Do you miss the Navarre, Minerva, and Shima archetypes as based on their recruitments? Do you miss being able to recruit enemies off the map? Heck, do you miss the Mathis? Do you miss Mathis? Do you miss being able to just, pick up an enemy unit who is worse than all the other enemies and say, this one's mine? Mathis, Amelia, I guess. Probably someone else. Do you miss that? Is that something that you want back in Fire Emblem? Because I kind of miss that. Whether unit's good or bad, I do miss the feeling of having an on-map recruitment, because it's a very, to me, it's an extra level of strategy. It's an extra level of, this is something I need to do. This is something I need to perfect. This is an opportunity to differentiate my playthrough, this playthrough, from someone else's, or a potentially different playthrough, is by recruiting this other unit. Nowadays, all you have is, okay, well, do I get the treasure or not? And do I, who do I put the experience on, or do I lose someone on the map or not? But what you end up getting, especially in Engage, there are some maps where you don't even have to grab the treasure. You just get the treasure for free. Apparently, you don't have to grab the Master Seal in Anna's map, you just get it for free even if you don't open up the chest. And at that point, why are we even including bonus objectives on these maps? What's even the point? Because it seems like IS has lost the plot a little bit. I like bonus objectives on maps. I think that recruitable enemies are a very worthwhile and very desirable bonus objective. And I think that they add a lot of extra texture to the map. Because if it's a recruitable enemy, they might kill you or kill themselves on you if you don't approach them correctly. It's not like just a treasure chest that you can just barrel in and grab eventually. No, you have to use finesse, you have to use tact, you have to come at these recruitments with a specific angle, and especially if it's a recruitment like Shima or Shinon or heaven forbid Xavier, you need to do specific things and approach the map in specific ways to get that unit. And even though some people say it limits strategy by forcing you to do specific things for a specific outcome, I would argue, it increases the strategic depth of the game because you're trying to manage everything else with whatever army you end up having at the time, while also performing these specific bonus objectives. I don't know. That's my rant on it. I miss Red Unit Recruitment. I want it to come back in the next Fire Emblem game, but what are your thoughts? Let me know in the comments down below. Until next time, this is Mithril Zenith signing out.